People often tell you that family is the safest harbor when a Category 5 hurricane hits. They preach that blood is the only unbreakable tether in a fragile, unpredictable world. They demand unconditional love, insisting that the family tree is a sacred structure. They forget a crucial, deadly detail. Sometimes the people sharing your exact DNA are the ones quietly drilling holes in the bottom of your hull while you sleep. They smile warmly. They pour your morning coffee with exactly 1 sugar. They ask about your day, and they patiently, methodically wait for you to drown. I did not realize my own harbor was rigged with underwater explosives until a humid, suffocating Saturday night in Miami. The coastal breeze blowing off Biscayne Bay was heavy. The air tasted of salt, distant jet fuel, and impending rain. I am 60 years old. I was standing on the pristine coral stone steps of the historic Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables. I wore a custom midnight blue tom Ford tuxedo. The tailoring was flawless. My late wife, Victoria, had ordered it for me just 3 weeks before her heart completely failed her. In my right breast pocket, resting directly over my own beating heart, was a worn navy velvet box. Inside that box lay Victoria's vintage 1960 Cartier diamond hairpin. It was a masterpiece of platinum and brilliant cut stones. I had been keeping it incredibly safe in a biometric vault in my floorboards. It was meant for this exact night. I wanted to physically place it into the dark hair of my granddaughter, Lily, right before she walked down the aisle. I wanted her to carry a tangible piece of her grandmother's unbreakable spirit into her new marriage. I stepped out of my 2023 Mercedes Maybach S680. The heavy, armored door closed with a solid, isolating thud. I handed the key fob to the valet. I took a deep, steadying breath, letting the warm Florida air fill my lungs. The hotel lobby was a masterclass in Mediterranean revival elegance. Hand-painted vaulted ceilings towered above. Soft, melancholic piano music drifted through the massive, arched corridors. Crystal champagne flutes clinked in the distance. The low, highly educated hum of Miami's absolute elite filled the expansive room. I walked slowly toward the grand ballroom. I felt a profound, quiet, and deeply earned pride. I spent 40 brutal years of my life building sterling apex aviation. It did not start in a glass boardroom. It started with a single, leased, rust bucket cargo plane flying highly turbulent, dangerous routes over the Caribbean Sea in the 1980s. I turned that single aircraft into a $60 million private aviation and international logistics empire. I sacrificed my youth. I sacrificed my sleep. I spent decades inhaling exhaust fumes, navigating brutal corporate turbulence, and fighting off vicious competitors. I built a financial fortress so my family would never, ever know the suffocating, paralyzing grip of poverty. Tonight was supposed to be the ultimate, glittering victory lap. I funded this entire wedding. Every single cent. The imported beluga caviar. The cascading white lilies. The vintage 2004 Dom Perignon. The 10-piece jazz orchestra. I wrote the checks. I paid for it all. As I approached the towering mahogany doors of the primary ballroom, the heavy, sweet scent of the lilies hit me. I recognized the floral arrangement. I approved the massive invoice myself. Then I saw him. My son, Julian. He was 40 years old. He stood squarely at the entrance. He looked sharp in a tailored, velvet lapel tuxedo. For a fraction of a second, my chest tightened with a familiar, blind paternal affection. I thought he was waiting there specifically to greet me, to walk the patriarch of the family to the head table. I raised my right hand to wave. The smile on my weathered face completely died. Julian's posture was rigid, stone cold. His jaw was locked so tight the muscles in his cheek violently twitched. His eyes darted nervously, constantly scanning the wealthy crowd mingling inside the ballroom. There was absolutely zero warmth in his face. None. He stepped directly into my path. He widened his stance. His broad shoulders physically blocked the heavy double doors. "Dad," Julian whispered. His voice was low, strained, thick with an unnatural, vibrating panic. "What are you doing here?" The question threw me completely off balance. The absolute absurdity of it stalled my highly analytical mind. What do you mean, Julian? I asked, keeping my tone perfectly civil. I am here for Lily's wedding. I brought your mother's diamonds for her. Julian swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed sharply against his stiff white collar. He looked over his shoulder, checking if anyone inside was watching. He turned back to me. His expression hardened into a flawless mask of pure, calculated indifference. Dad, you're not on the list, he said. He did not blink. I stared at him. I tried to process the specific sequence of words. Not on the list. Julian, I am the patriarch of this family. I am the grandfather of the bride. I paid for the floor you are currently standing on. There was a mistake with the seating chart, Julian said. His voice was flat, empty, devoid of a single human emotion. The venue is at strict capacity. The fire marshal is inside right now doing a head count. There is literally no chair for you in there, Dad. Go home. Go home before you cause a scene and ruin Lily's night. My blood turned to solid ice. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of his words hung in the humid air like a physical, heavy blow to my ribs. A mistake. Strict capacity. Exactly 6 months ago, Julian had come to my oceanfront house. He was physically shaking. He sat in my study and begged for financial salvation. He claimed the IRS was launching a brutal, comprehensive audit on his personal accounts. He spun a terrifying, highly detailed narrative about federal agents and frozen assets. He begged me for $1.8 million. He said it was to pay the federal fines, keep him out of federal prison, and secure a modest, quiet wedding for Lily. I was drowning in the fresh grief of losing Victoria. When a son comes to you terrified, the ruthless soul steps aside. The protective father takes the wheel. Without a single second thought, I authorized the wire transfer. I funded this lavish, extravagant affair. And now, the boy who took my millions was standing in a doorway, looking me dead in the eye and telling me there was no chair. Before I could construct a logical response, a second figure stepped out from the deep shadows of the ballroom corridor. It was my daughter-in-law, Camilla. She was 38. She wore avacris, emerald green Oscar de la Renta silk gown. 3-carat diamond drop earrings dangled from her lobes. She held a crystal flute of champagne. She slipped her slender arm tightly through Julian's. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated disgust. It was the exact look you'd give a stray, diseased animal begging for scraps at a 5-star restaurant. Nathaniel, what part of go home do you not understand? She sneered. Her voice dripped with toxic venom. This is an exclusive event. We cannot have you wandering around looking confused. We have important people here tonight. I looked past her bare shoulder. The heavy doors were open just enough. I saw the crowd. These were not friends of the bride. I recognized the faces immediately. I saw senior venture capitalists from the Brickell financial district. I saw global aviation magnates. I saw the politicians I used to lobby. My peers. My ruthless competitors. And they were actively watching me. They were whispering behind their crystal glasses. They were pointing subtly at the 60-year-old founder of Sterling Apex Aviation, being turned away at the door like a common, unwanted trespasser. The humiliation burned my skin like acid, but it was quickly, entirely swallowed by a glacial, terrifying clarity. Camilla leaned in closer. Her heavy, expensive floral perfume turned my stomach. Security is standing right over there, Nathaniel, she whispered, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. If you do not turn around and walk out those doors right now, I will have them drag you off the premises. Do not test me. Any other man would have screamed. Any other father would have physically smashed those doors open. I did not. I did not survive 40 years in the global corporate shark tank by throwing emotional tantrums. Screaming would only validate whatever vicious lies they had already told that crowd of billionaires about my mental state. I looked at the diamonds hanging from Camilla's ears. I paid the jeweler for those stones. I looked at Julian, my son. He stared firmly at the polished marble floor, too cowardly to meet his father's gaze. I didn't say anything. I stayed completely quiet. It is fine, Julian, I said. My voice was dangerously calm, perfectly leveled. I understand completely. I did not confront them that night. Let me explain why. Asterisk, please find a comfortable seat. This story is going to take you somewhere very far and very dark. Hit that like button and drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Asterisk. I did not wait for a single word response. I turned my back on them. I walked away. The heavy mahogany doors clicked shut behind me. They sealed the warmth, the jazz, and my traitorous family inside. I did not look back. I walked smoothly through the grand lobby. My hard leather shoes echoed sharply against the stone floor. The valet looked shocked to see me return in under 10 minutes, but he sprinted to retrieve my Maybach. When I stepped out into the humid Miami night, the thick, heavy air brought me violently back to my senses. I slid into the quiet, soundproof leather interior of my car. The silence of the cabin was absolute, deafening. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the navy velvet box. I ran my thumb over the worn fabric. They didn't just reject me at a door. They erased me from the narrative. The pieces of the psychological puzzle began clicking together with brutal, mechanical force. The total lack of phone calls over the last quarter. The vague, shifting excuses when I asked to see Lily. The sudden, desperate panic about a federal audit 6 months ago. This was absolutely not a seating chart mistake. This was a highly calculated execution. I pulled out my phone. The digital dashboard clock read exactly 7:30 p.m. I dialed the private, encrypted number of Silas Vance. He was my chief legal counsel, a man who hunted in the dark. He answered on the second ring. "Nathaniel," Silas said. His deep voice sounded genuinely surprised. "Shouldn't you be giving the grandfather's toast right now?" "Silas," I said. My voice was entirely void of human emotion. "Julian just locked me out of the wedding. He threatened me with hotel security." A heavy, suffocating pause fell over the cellular line. Silas was a legal predator. He had been my wartime general for 2 decades. He understood the exact power dynamics of my family. He knew instantly what this meant. "What are your specific orders, Nathaniel?" His tone went ice cold, shifting from friend to executioner. "Trigger the winter protocol," I commanded. I stared blankly out the tinted window at the glowing neon lights of the city as we drove down Collins Avenue. "Freeze everything. The primary family trust. The corporate access codes. I want every single dollar tied to Julian's name locked down tight by sunrise." "Consider it done," Silas replied. I could hear the rapid, sharp clicking of his mechanical keyboard in the background. "But you need to come to my office tomorrow morning. Early. I'm looking at the live banking portals right now. They didn't just spend the $1.8 million, Nathaniel. They have been digging deep into the main corporate vault." I ended the call. I leaned my head back against the plush leather headrest. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully humiliated a fragile, aging, grieving man. But you do not lock the wolf out of the house when the wolf is the one who drew the blueprints and bought the timber. I instructed my driver to take me back to my oceanfront mansion in Golden Beach. The sprawling estate was entirely dark. I walked straight into my home office. It smelled of aged leather, rain, and old money. I sat at my massive oak desk. My mind operated with maximum efficiency. How did I miss a massive, systemic betrayal taking root inside my own house? The answer was painful, but simple. I took off my armor around my own blood. I allowed myself to be an indulgent father instead of a ruthless CEO. I opened my encrypted silver laptop. The screen cast a harsh blue glow across my face. I logged in my personal, heavily guarded server. 10 years ago, anticipating corporate espionage from rival aviation firms, I had a ghost backdoor coded directly into the Sterling Apex mainframe. It was an invisible master key, a silent observer. Julian believed he had locked me out of the modern financial applications when he took over day-to-day operations. He forgot about the structural foundation. I typed a few highly specific keywords into the search bar. Asterisk Biltmore. Wedding. Julian. Escrow. Asterisk. The archaic system churned. The processing icon spun slowly. Then a single forwarded email appeared at the top of the list. It was an automated receipt generated by a primary vendor. It was a high-resolution invoice. I stared intently at the bold black numbers printed at the absolute bottom of the page. The total amount billed for a single evening of floral arrangements and champagne was exactly $75,000. I let out a harsh, completely humorless laugh. It echoed against the silent walls of my office. $75,000. Just 3 short months ago, Camilla sat on the edge of my velvet sofa in this very room. She wiped away delicate, perfectly timed tears. She swore to my face that Lily was suffering from crippling, paralyzing social anxiety regarding the wedding. She painted a remarkably vivid picture of a tiny, 20-person backyard dinner. Paper plates, simple string lights. She used my deep, protective concern for my granddaughter's mental health to keep me safely locked away in my house. You absolutely do not spend $75,000 on imported orchids for a quiet family barbecue. The plausible lie was annihilated in an instant. The delicate narrative they spoon-fed me was nothing but a cheap, extravagant theatrical production. I scrolled down to the billing detail section. I needed to see exactly how Julian routed the massive payment to the hotel. As I read the typed address, my breath suddenly caught in my throat. The cold logic of the situation fractured. The billing address listed on the $75,000 invoice did not belong to the Biltmore Hotel. It did not belong to Julian's sprawling suburban estate. The address was located in the heart of the Brickell financial district. It belonged to an elite, highly aggressive venture capital firm, Brickell Capital Partners. They specialized exclusively in hostile takeovers. They ruthlessly liquidated legacy aviation companies. They were absolute predators who fed on vulnerable family businesses without an ounce of mercy. Why in the world was my own flesh and blood son routing a massive wedding floral invoice through corporate liquidators? Venture capitalists do not care about weddings. They care about dismantling empires piece by piece. Sterling Apex Aviation was a privately held fortress. I held the absolute controlling interest. There was only one possible way a predatory firm could ever get their hands on my company. The controlling shareholder had to willingly step down. Or the controlling shareholder had to be declared legally incompetent to manage his own affairs. That single, terrifying thought was the master key. It unlocked a deeply unsettling, chilling memory from exactly 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, Julian and Camilla had cornered me in my own kitchen. They put on masks of agonizing, profound worry. They claimed I was constantly repeating myself, leaving the front doors unlocked, forgetting minor details about corporate accounts, staring off into space for hours. They painted a highly detailed picture of a man rapidly losing his grip on reality. They forced me to take a comprehensive cognitive evaluation at a private, highly exclusive Miami clinic. They framed it as a simple routine checkup, just to give everyone some peace of mind before the stress of the wedding. They cornered me with their faux love. I sat in the sterile, brightly lit examination room. I took the rigorous tests. I answered memory prompts. I solved complex spatial reasoning puzzles. After 2 hours, the neurologist smiled warmly. He told me my cognitive function was completely flawless. He said my mind was as sharp as a man half my age. He assured me there was absolutely zero evidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any cognitive decline. I walked out into the corridor to share the wonderful news with my son. I caught their reflection in a heavy glass door before they saw me. They were not relieved. Julian was furious. His jaw was clenched so tightly the muscles bulged. His face was flushed with dark red anger. Camilla was gripping his arm. Her eyes were wide with absolute, unadulterated panic. They looked exactly like 2 criminals whose master plan had just been catastrophically derailed. When I announced my perfect bill of health, their expressions shifted instantly. The fury vanished, replaced by tight, incredibly forced smiles. Sitting in my dark office tonight, armed with the knowledge of the venture capital firm, the truth was blindingly obvious. Why would a son be furious that a 60-year-old father does not have dementia? Why would a daughter-in-law panic at the news of perfect cognitive health? Because they needed me to be sick. They desperately needed that doctor to declare me mentally unfit. If I had failed that cognitive exam, Julian would have used a fraudulent medical diagnosis to seize immediate, total control of Sterling Apex. He would use my illness to bypass the board of directors. He would hand the keys of my empire directly to the venture capital firm in Brickell. The $1.8 million I wired him was just the down payment for their corporate treason. The fake backyard dinner was designed to keep me isolated while they finalized the hostile takeover behind my back. My own flesh and blood wasn't just stealing my money. They were methodically building a false paper trail to strip me of my human rights. They were trying to medically and legally erase me. My hands were not shaking from fear. They were perfectly still. They were fueled by a towering, righteous rage. I did not react emotionally. I needed to map out exactly how they planned to finish the job. If they knew I was aware of their conspiracy, they would accelerate their sinister timeline. They had proven they were capable of manufacturing a crisis. I needed to give them a false sense of absolute victory. They needed to drop their guard completely. I walked into the adjoining master bathroom. I splashed freezing cold water on my face. The water dripped from my jaw. I looked in the mirror. Quietly, methodically, I actively practiced the physical posture of the fragile man they desperately wanted me to be. I let my broad shoulders slump. I curved my spine. I softened my eyes, allowing a vacant, lost expression to settle over my features. I cleared my throat, making it sound raspy, weak, broken. At exactly 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, I picked up my phone. Julian and Camilla would be waking up with heavy, expensive champagne hangovers. They would be basking in the golden, intoxicating glow of their stolen triumph. They were bracing themselves for an angry, explosive confrontation about the hotel security guards. I did not give him the chance to play defense. I tapped Julian's name on the glass screen. The phone rang exactly 3 times before it connected. "Hello," Julian answered. His voice sounded groggy, slightly guarded. I let out a long, trembling sigh. I made my voice sound incredibly small, disoriented, pathetic. "Julian?" I whispered. I injected a note of desperate, fragile panic into my tone. "Son, is it you? I'm confused. Did the wedding happen already? I think I sat down in my reading chair after dinner last night and just fell asleep. Did I miss Lily's big day?" A sharp, stunned silence fell over the cellular line. I could hear his mental gears violently grinding. He had been preparing for a furious corporate titan. Instead, he was getting a senile old man who did not even remember leaving his own house. I squeezed my eyes shut. I forced my voice to crack. "I am so sorry, Julian," I whimpered. I sounded absolutely heartbroken. My head has been so foggy lately. Please tell me I didn't ruin the small backyard dinner. When Julian finally spoke, the defensive tension was completely gone from his voice. It was instantly replaced by a thick, syrupy layer of pure, arrogant condescension. "Oh, Dad," Julian sighed. He sounded exactly like a frustrated parent talking to a dim-witted toddler. "It is completely fine. We were wondering where you were. But Camilla said you were probably exhausted from the grief. You have been so confused lately, Dad. It is for the best." I gripped the solid oak edge of my desk. I squeezed so hard my knuckles ached. But I kept my voice perfectly pathetic. "Was it beautiful?" I asked weakly. "It was perfect, Dad," Julian replied. The lies slipped effortlessly through his teeth. "Just 20 people. Very simple. Very quiet. Lily wore a simple cotton dress. She missed you, of course. But she understood. We all know you are not yourself these days. You need a rest. You need to stop worrying about anything complex." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him about the $75,000 floral invoice. I wanted to tell him I saw the venture capitalists dancing under crystal chandeliers while I stood in the humid dark. I wanted to rip the phone apart, but I played the senile fool exactly as they needed me to. "I'm just so tired, son," I murmured. I let my voice trail off into a weak, airy whisper. "I feel like I'm losing my mind. Thank you for taking care of everything for me. Don't worry about a single thing, Dad," Julian said. His tone was swelling with arrogant pride. "Camilla and I have everything completely under control. You just stay in the house and rest. We will come by in a few days to sort out your new schedule. Just relax." I thanked him profusely. I apologized for my failing memory again. I said goodbye. I waited for the distinct electronic click of the call disconnecting. The click never came. Julian, in his arrogant, hungover state, had pulled the phone away from his ear, but he failed to press the red button to end the call properly. The line remained wide open. I stood completely frozen in my home office. I barely dared to breathe. Through the tiny speaker, I heard the background noises of his master bedroom. I heard the rustle of 1,000 thread count silk sheets. I heard the soft, heavy thud of the cell phone being carelessly tossed onto a wooden nightstand. Then, I heard Camilla's voice. Muffled, but perfectly clear. Was that him? She asked. Her tone was sharp, alert. Was he furious about the security guards last night? I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. Julian let out a cruel, booming laugh. It sent a shiver of absolute physical disgust straight down my spine. Furious? Julian scoffed. His voice dripped with victorious contempt. He doesn't even remember going to the hotel. He thinks he fell asleep in his reading chair and missed a simple backyard barbecue. I told you the isolation would break him down. He was crying, Camilla, apologizing for his bad memory. He is completely lost. There was a brief, agonizing pause. Then, Camilla let out a deeply satisfied, purring sigh. Is perfect, she said smoothly. I was so worried we would have to fight him on the transfer of corporate power. But his brain is finally turning to mush, just like we needed it to. And the best part? What? Julian asked. The bank officially accepted the forged signature on the mansion's deed, Camilla boasted. My blood ran completely, entirely cold. I know, Julian laughed. We leveraged his oceanfront house for an extra $4 million in cash. We used it to charter that massive super yacht for the venture capitalists tomorrow night. We are selling the company for $60 million on Monday morning. By the time the bank realizes the mortgage is totally fraudulent, we will be drinking margaritas in the Cayman Islands. Call the clinic, Camilla commanded. Her voice suddenly turned cold and brutally efficient. Tell them we're moving the timeline up right now. We don't need to wait. Tell them we are coming in to sign the permanent guardianship papers. And then we finally move him to the closed psychiatric ward on Tuesday. The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone from my ear. I placed it flat on my desk. I sat completely frozen in the silence for a long time. The sheer magnitude of their betrayal settled deep into my bones. We move him on Tuesday. In 48 hours, they intended to strip away my legal rights. Force me into an asylum. Lock me away. They wanted to bury me alive. But the forged signature on my mansion? That was a fatal, catastrophic miscalculation. The shock evaporated. A pure, glacial wrath settled permanently into my foundation. I was no longer an indulgent father. I was the founder of Sterling Apex Aviation, and my son had just declared a hostile takeover of my life. I did not sleep. I showered. I put on a tailored Navy suit. I drove through the dark, empty streets of Miami. The rain was beginning to fall in heavy, rhythmic sheets. At exactly 5 a.m., I arrived at Silas Vance's law firm in the Brickell district. The lobby was deserted. I took the private elevator to the top floor. Silas was already waiting in a secure, soundproof conference room. I sat down. I told him everything. I recounted the agonizing phone call, the $1.8 million, the planned Tuesday psychiatric hold, and finally, I told him about the forged signature on the mortgage of my oceanfront mansion. Silas did not look alarmed. He smiled. It was a cold, deeply predatory smile. Nathaniel, Silas said, his voice a low rumble. Julian is an absolute fool. He leveraged a house you do not own. I nodded slowly. The brilliant architecture of my estate planning was doing exactly its job. 5 years ago, shortly after Victoria passed away, I had quietly transferred the deed to that mansion. I placed the property into a highly protected, irrevocable trust. The sole, exclusive beneficiary of that trust was my granddaughter, Lily. Julian didn't just forge your signature on a personal loan, Silas explained. His tone dripped with dark legal mockery. He fraudulently leveraged a property owned entirely by a federal trust. That constitutes federal bank fraud. It carries a mandatory 20-year sentence in federal prison. He handed them the rope. They tied the noose themselves. But I needed undeniable proof of their psychological warfare. I needed Lily to clearly see the monsters who raised her. Silas slid a matte black flash drive across the glass table. His private investigator had successfully planted a military-grade listening device in the VIP lounge at the Biltmore Hotel on the night of the wedding. I plugged the drive into my laptop. I pressed play. I listened to Julian bragging to the venture capitalists. I heard him casually discuss the chemical alteration of my blood pressure medication to induce chronic fatigue. Then, the heavy wooden door creaked open. I heard Lily. She burst into the lounge. She was hyperventilating. She was crying, desperately asking why I was not at her wedding. Then came Camilla's sickeningly sweet voice. She lied flawlessly. She told Lily I had suffered a massive stroke. She claimed I was paralyzed, completely disoriented, too ashamed to let anyone see me in a wheelchair. She weaponized a bride's love to maintain absolute control of the narrative. I stopped the recording. The silence in the office was heavier than lead. I picked up my phone. I dialed Lily's number. I told her to meet me immediately at a quiet, obscure coffee shop in Coral Gables. I explicitly instructed her not to tell her parents. When she walked into the cafe, she looked completely drained. Her eyes were red and puffy. She saw me sitting upright in my suit, perfectly healthy, not paralyzed, not in a wheelchair. The physical shock paralyzed her. She practically ran across the floor. She collapsed against my chest, sobbing violently. I held her tight. I let her cry. Then, I guided her into the booth. Quietly, methodically, I laid out the documents. I showed her the fraudulent mortgage. I showed her the offshore routing numbers. Then, I opened my laptop. I played the unedited audio recording. Lily sat rigidly in the booth. She listened to her father excitedly plan my institutionalization. She listened to her mother flawlessly weaponize her grief to keep her out of the room. Her entire worldview violently shattered. Everything she knew about her family was a rotting, toxic lie. I watched the profound sadness slowly drain out of her young face. The tears completely stopped falling. Her posture straightened perfectly. She mimicked the rigid, unforgiving stance I had adopted. The heartbreak crystallized into a pure, glacial wrath. She was a true sterling. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. She looked me dead in the eye. "Grandpa," Lily whispered. Her voice dropped into a smooth, dangerous calm. "What time is the board meeting tomorrow? I won't watch them burn." We spent the entirety of Sunday night meticulously coordinating our strike. Julian believed he was selling a functioning global empire. He was a creature of surface appearances. He forgot about the deep architecture. The true, unassailable value of Sterling Apex did not reside in the physical private jets or the steel hangars. The $60 million valuation rested entirely in our proprietary flight coordination algorithms and our international logistics patents. Silas and I isolated the infrastructure. We legally severed every single algorithm and patent from the primary corporate body. We extracted the beating digital heart of the company. We moved the assets into a brand new, completely hidden holding entity solely under my name. We left Julian a hollow, useless physical shell. Meanwhile, Silas coordinated with his contacts at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The agents reviewed the forged, irrevocable trust mortgage documents. The evidence of federal bank fraud was completely irrefutable. The warrants were signed. We let Julian and Camilla host their lavish super yacht party on Sunday evening. We let them entertain the venture capitalists on a 150-foot vessel rented with $4 million of fraudulent money. We let them toast to their brilliant crimes. We pushed them to the absolute peak of their arrogance. The higher the pedestal, the more devastating the fall. Monday morning arrived. It was exactly 8:55 a.m. I wore my charcoal bespoke suit. I walked through the sliding glass doors of the corporate headquarters. My posture was perfectly rigid. The security guards stared at me in open shock. The fragile, trembling widower was completely gone. I rode the private elevator to the top floor. I pushed open the heavy mahogany doors of the primary glass boardroom. The room was packed. Flashing cameras from the local business press illuminated the space. Camilla had invited them to witness her glorious ascension. Julian sat squarely at the head of the massive table. He had prematurely claimed my chair. Camilla was seated right beside him, wearing a triumphant, predatory smile. Scattered along the table were the senior partners from Brickell Capital Partners. Thick portfolios containing the $60 million sale contracts were neatly arranged in front of them. Expensive pens were hovering over the dotted lines. I walked slowly and deliberately toward the only empty chair at the far end. I sat down. I rested my hands flat against the polished wood. Silence settled over the room like fresh concrete. The color instantly drained from Julian's face. He looked like a freshly painted corpse. His mouth opened and closed. The expensive silver pen slipped from his trembling fingers. It clattered loudly against the table. "Dad?" Julian stammered. His voice cracked into a pathetic squeak. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be resting." Camilla was completely frozen. Her eyes darted frantically. I did not raise my voice. I maintained a smooth, icy composure. "I'm not here to rest, Julian," I stated. My voice echoed with pure, glacial wrath. "I am here to clean house." I turned my attention to the stunned venture capitalists. "I suggest you put your pens away immediately," I instructed. "The acquisition you are attempting to finalize is based entirely on fraudulent documents and a malicious medical conspiracy. Furthermore, as of Sunday night, Sterling Apex no longer owns a single proprietary algorithm. The digital assets have been legally extracted. You are currently attempting to buy a completely empty cardboard box." The lead venture capitalist turned a deep shade of crimson. He glared furiously at Julian. He grabbed the $60 million contract with both hands. He ripped the thick stack of papers completely in half. He threw the torn documents directly into Julian's chest. "You arrogant, stupid boy," the investor hissed. They grabbed their briefcases and stormed out of the boardroom without a single backward glance. The press corps frantically snapped photos. Julian collapsed backward into his leather chair. He was gasping for air. "You cannot do this," Julian whispered. Sweat beaded heavily on his forehead. "I am the acting executive. I have the legal authority." The heavy double doors swung wide open. Silas Vance strode inside. He was flanked by 3 stern-faced federal agents in dark windbreakers. "You have absolutely nothing," Julian, Silas stated coldly, "because you do not own that oceanfront mansion. Your father transferred that estate into an irrevocable trust 5 years ago. You leveraged a property owned entirely by your daughter. That is federal bank fraud." Camilla let out a sharp, hysterical scream. She covered her face with her hands. The federal agents stepped forward into the center of the room. The harsh metallic clicking of heavy steel handcuffs ratcheting closed echoed through the quiet boardroom. The agent grabbed Julian by his shoulder, forcing his arms firmly behind his back. "Julian Sterling," the agent announced. His voice boomed with absolute, terrifying finality. "You are under arrest for federal bank fraud, massive corporate embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." Julian began to sob openly. His knees buckled as the cold steel locked tightly around his wrists. "Dad, please," he begged. Tears streamed down his pale face. "Please stop this. I am your son. We can fix this." Before I could even respond to his pathetic pleading, Lily stepped forward from the shadows. She walked slowly and deliberately around the massive table. She stopped directly in front of her weeping mother. Camilla looked up. Her eyes pleaded for a shred of sympathy from the daughter she had manipulated so deeply. Lily did not offer a single word of comfort. Instead, she reached up to her ears. She unclasped the heavy, sparkling diamond earrings she was wearing. The extravagant wedding gift Camilla had purchased using the stolen mortgage funds. Lily dropped the glittering diamonds onto the mahogany table. They landed with a sharp, dismissive clatter right next to the torn contracts. "I'm moving in with Grandpa," Lily stated. Her voice was perfectly steady and completely devoid of emotion. "You are absolutely dead to me." The federal agents began dragging Julian aggressively toward the exit. He dragged his feet, desperately fighting their firm grip. He was overcome by pure, unadulterated panic. His eyes found mine across the long expanse of the polished table. "Dad, please do not do this to me," he wailed. His voice cracked into a high, desperate scream. You cannot just lock me out of my own life. I stood tall. I buttoned my suit jacket with slow, deliberate precision. I remembered the heavy doors of the Biltmore Hotel. I remembered standing on the cold pavement while my family celebrated my destruction inside. I looked my son dead in the eye. I felt absolutely nothing but cold, satisfying finality. "You're not on the list, Julian," I replied. My voice sliced through his hysterical sobbing like a razor-sharp steel blade. "There was a mistake. Go home." I turned my back on him. I offered my arm to Lily. She took it firmly. Together, we walked out of the glass boardroom. We left the ruined, pathetic ashes of his false empire far behind us. Standing on my balcony later that evening, looking out over Biscayne Bay and sipping black coffee with Lily, I realized the absolute hardest truth of my 60 years. Family is not defined by a simple marriage certificate. It is certainly not guaranteed by shared blood. It is defined by absolute, unwavering loyalty. Sometimes, the only way to save your ship is to ruthlessly throw the mutineers overboard. Let that sink in.